Do you want to know the success habits of the world's most brilliant people and then how to implement those habits as well? Then this episode is for you. Hello, Sales Nation. Welcome to today's episode of the Salesman Podcast. On today's show, we have Tim Han. He is the founder and creator of the awesomely successful YouTube channel, Success Insider. Today, we're diving into essentially how to create success in sales, business, life in general, the tactics, the routines, the hacks, the habits that we need to implement, and a whole lot more. And so with all that said, let's jump in to today's episode. Tim, welcome to the Salesman Podcast.
Thank you for having me on, Will.
You're more than welcome, sir. I'm glad to have you on. We're going to dive into today tactics, routines, habits, anything else that comes along on the journey as well for sales success. And I want to start off by asking you, I think almost at this point it's cliched of salespeople specifically, but most people know what they should be doing to have success. And I feel, and from research and from asking questions and speaking to successful people on the show, it seems like the gap between success a lot of the time is having the habits or routines to implement it. So from that perspective, is that something that you see in all the work that you do and all the training that you do, that there's a gap between success and kind of averageness, if we put it that way, and how much of that gap is covered by just doing the right things every day without thinking about it because it's a habit?
Yeah, I think that it's got a lot to do with that. You know, one of the things I always say to my students is, I believe every successful person, what separates them from winners and losers is the fact that they've got discipline. And, you know, it's funny because I can quickly see where somebody's heading from the moment I speak to them within 60 seconds, because I speak on stage all around the world and I get people asking these questions. And when they're asking me these questions, it's quite funny because somebody once came to me and they said to me, Tim, you know, I've got the best idea in the world right now. I was like, okay, here we go. I've heard this one before. And then they're like, Tim, could you help me market it? You know, I know the fact that this is going to make millions and so forth. He's selling it to me. And I said, all right, great. So what's the idea? And he's like, oh, I'm not going to share that with you. Do you mind if you sign this NDA or something? I was like, you know what? Let's just leave it here. Because one of the things I've realized, this is a pattern a lot of people who aren't getting results share. The reality is like, when I really speak with people who are killing it, and online, offline, they're more than happy to share their ideas because most people like the discipline to follow through on them. And I'm exactly the same. And so whenever somebody asks me, Tim, how are you doing this? I'm like, okay, here you go. Because I know the fact that it's only 1% who's going to follow through. And so for me, my habits in my life has been, how can I increase discipline? Because I haven't been always the person who is disciplined in life. And the moment I really learned these habits, it's changed a lot of things for me. So that's what I was saying.
So discipline is something that I am continuously focused on because I am very naturally, I don't know whether this is a gene that I was unfortunately passed down to. So I've got my dad's bald, so I've got the gene for not going bald. So thank you for that, Dad. But I might have been passed down a gene for procrastination from somewhere because I am constantly suffering from it. I have to consistently trick myself. I have to consistently use notes, all kind of tactics, techniques that we'll get onto later in the show to avoid procrastination. Is this something? Because I guess you've got two ends. You've got procrastination and discipline, either ends of the scale here. Is this something that you feel that we are born with? Is something that comes from our parents, our schooling or upbringing? And is this a switch, Tim, that is binary that we can turn on or off? Or is it something that we have to work on forever?
I believe, yes, there are some people who've been part of the lucky sperm gang, I like to call them, who've had the fortune of, I suppose, being born with discipline. But, you know, I was far from that. When I was younger, I used to be involved with, you know, taking a lot of drugs and alcohol, you name it. And I was just one of the laziest people you could probably meet. And through that, when I went through, let's say, my life-changing journey, I found that you can change. And this is something that I always like to share with my students or somebody who find me online. My story is about change. The fact that wherever you come from, you can change this habit. And so I found in my life, discipline is something that you have to work on daily. If you really are somebody who's lazy and you want to go to somebody who is more productive, it's something you can change, but you have to work on it daily. And even if you are disciplined, you know, I would question that because I believe we can always improve. And so that's what I would say to that, yeah.
How do we know if we are disciplined? Because it's one thing to make that statement. I guess it's another to stop and ponder for a second if we're on this sliding scale of whether we are somewhat disciplined or whether we are military-esque in our quest for success.
I think discipline, for me, I can tell when somebody's disciplined just from their energy. And I'm sure you may have found that from your podcast journey. It's funny because when I interview guests here on Success Insider Show who are fairly successful, you can feel it. It's the energy they've got, right? And then I go speak to somebody out there, like in the normal world, and you can just really tell just the way they treat themselves, the way they dress, the way they are, the tonality, the voice. That's how I can tell in regards to themselves. But how can they tell? I think it's just something that you know. It's that inner knowing. And it's the fact that when you, for example, I'm not sure about you, I've recommended a lot of books to people who I used to say they were my friends, which are now my old friends. And I remember, like, I used to say to them, listen, read this book, go through this course, listen to this coach. He will change your life. A couple of weeks later, oh, Tim, I've been really busy. Oh, your work's been stressful. Like, all of this BS excuses. That's how I can tell, the fact that I'm disciplined, because I always find when I get given advice, I'm the first to implement it. And so it's that mentality, I suppose, over time, I've realized actually I've got discipline more than majority of people. So it's that inner knowing.
That is something. So this is interesting. This is something that's been brought up on the show before and this may be a mindset. This may be the wording, and I don't want to put the spotlight on me too much, but I think I'm a good case study of this. I've brought up on the show before that I procrastinate, that I have to use all these weird tips and hacks to stop it happening. And the response every single time has been, well, you are disciplined because you found how to solve the problem. So if my natural state is to procrastinate, my natural state is to sit and watch 4 hours of your videos on YouTube, and it's all great information, it's all getting absorbed, it's all useful, but perhaps after 30 minutes of watching the videos, it'd be more useful to implement some of it versus just continue to watch. So other people have kind of mirrored back at me that perhaps I am disciplined, but I don't give myself credit for it. So where I'm going with this, Tim, is discipline something that you get up, you just do all your stuff all day, you have a really productive day, and then you go to bed? Or is discipline something that we have to perhaps either we rewire our brain to do consistently, or we have to do what I do, which is essentially trick the dumb parts of my brain all the time into doing something that's more useful than just sitting on YouTube or just playing Age of Empires or whatever computer game I'm playing at the time.
I've never really questioned discipline to this level, Will. Thanks for bringing this up. I think discipline for me, what discipline is going against your primitive-based desires. Because we got the primal mind, right? That's telling us every single day, lay in bed, don't do this, fear this. And, we are naturally fear-based creatures because we got a part of our brain called the amygdala that's designed to look at the negative before the positive. And so what I view discipline as, this is personal viewpoint, is somebody who can really control that fear and just go do it anyway. And being able to really train the amygdala, okay, so it goes straight to the prefrontal cortex and it can logically think, this is what I got to do. And, I believe it's not about just hustling hard because, there are a lot of people who hustle hard, but they're not getting results. It's about working smarter and really just being able to consistently work smarter. Because I've trained, for example, people on my YouTube channel, and it's funny because they comment like on one of the videos one time, they're like, Tim, I'm going to absorb all of this, and you tell me speed of implementation is very important. And then a couple of weeks later, they comment another video, they're like, Tim, I'm back here again. I haven't managed to follow through. It's not about just, for example, going to the gym, lifting weight once. Can you do the thing that is going to grow your body or your business consistently, right? So that's what I believe discipline is all about. Yeah,
makes total sense. I like this kind of loop back to physical and physical structure in our brain and actual science, rather than some kind of woo-woo concept that a lot of people kind of pull this back to. I don't want to dive into the law of attraction or anything like that, but that gets looped into these conversations, unfortunately, when I think you're right. I think you've got the dumb part, you call it essentially the reptilian part of your brain. I call it the dumb part of your brain that is wanting you to not get out your comfort zone. There's wanting you to survive in the moment, I guess, versus learn to thrive in the future. And it's overcoming, there's almost, I find, so I'll use the Pomodoro technique. So I'll sit down for 25 minutes, just commit to 25 minutes of work, and then have 5 minutes break. Once I do one of those cycles, that reptilian part of my brain is silenced. And then I'll do 8 hours straight and not eat and really kind of get up for a drink or do anything, and I'll just be in the zone. So we could perhaps come on to that in the future and further on in the interview. But there's one thing you said that I don't want to gloss over. I think is really interesting. You talked about the energy of an individual and that link to discipline, success, or however we want to define kind of where they are in their journey. Could energy be used and interchanged with the word charisma, perhaps? And is that something that is a sum of doing everything right, or should we be trying to kind of fake it till we make it with charisma? And does that feed back into just success in general as well?
I think for me, it's kind of like I separate charisma with energy. For me, it's kind of like where I focus on, but I would separate it from charisma in the sense that I view myself as an energy manager, because people, they say to me, Tim, give me the best productivity tips. And I say, well, before that, you need to know how to manage your energy. Because I always say to them, hey, for example, if you were to be happy, if you were to be energized all day long, do you think you'll get more work done? Yes or no? And often they're like, yes. And I'm like, well, you got to know how to not be so much a roller coaster ride in regards to your energy levels. How can you maintain this performance so you're constantly on the up? And so I'm always like an energy manager in the sense that really just working out what is it that's bringing me the up energy in my life? What's the routines, the habits doing that? And then also I can tell throughout the day what's bringing me down. And that may be, for example, the lunch I've eaten. So I basically tell myself never eat that again, right? Or maybe it's something I did in the morning. Maybe I worked out too hard or something like that. And I'm always constantly asking myself, how can I become a better, more efficient energy manager? Because I think that's far surpasses any productivity tips. So were you saying like how energy is like charisma? Did I understand your question right? Or
Yeah, so it seems that, and this makes total sense as you're describing it, and I'm going to follow on with this in a second, but it seemed the way you were describing energy, the way that people come to the table, you could use that as a differentiator between someone who is disciplined and is doing awesome stuff, who has implemented useful habits that help them have success in sales and in business. You can separate them from other individuals by their energy, and I kind of like piled charisma on top of that. But are we talking about physical just energy and being raring to go? Is that the real differentiator?
yeah, because it's kind of like how you do anything is how you do everything. When I can tell when somebody's got, for example, charisma or confidence, I know the fact that they've probably worked on this, because I can tell when somebody has practiced speaking or something like that, the tonality and the energy output is just different. And so I know the fact that they're probably quite successful in other areas of their life, because I've yet to meet somebody that I've interviewed on my podcast who talks very bland, boring. Like they've got energy. You can see that they're uplit, and you can see the fact that they're serving as well from a right place. It's just very from the heart. So that's how I spot them normally.
That makes total sense. So that's something that we can, Sales Nation, we can take and we can think about. And I guess there's a balance there between it's an outcome of doing the right things, and then it's a symptom if you've not got that energy, if you're not coming from the right place, that you're not doing the right things as well. It's almost, that's the kind of the point that I was perhaps looking for, Tim, of how do we know whether we're disciplined and whether we've got the right habits. But something interesting here, energy levels. Are we talking here physical energy levels of we need to lift weights and work out, we need to have a smoothie or something like that for lunch, rather than driving past KFC and going, "Oh, go on, I'll treat myself this time"? Or are we talking about, with these ups and downs energy, are we talking about what you talked about at the beginning of the show, which is removing perhaps friends who aren't disciplined, who are dragging us down, and they can suck energy? So are we talking about here physical energy, or are we talking about just, I guess, mental energy and willpower as well?
I would put all of it together. I think more so, though, I am talking more about physical energy. But, if your mental energy is sapped as well, good luck with your day, right? Because that's the thing with, entrepreneurs. They, for example, you don't understand it until you enter the world of entrepreneurship. How can somebody get tired just typing on their laptop? But honestly, your brain equals fried. So I think you have to manage different energies. So in regards to mental, physical, that's a good point. I would combine the two. You have to make sure that, for example, I don't believe that one can succeed hanging around with losers who are sapping their energy in their life. And so you have to make sure you're really balancing this and making sure that everybody is bringing you that positive mental energy, and you're doing this stuff in your health that's bringing you the physical energy as well.
And just for context on this, to even, and tell me if I'm wrong here, this is obviously an opinion, but to overshadow, so obviously I'm an entrepreneur as well as a sales professional, and I'm building the company as well as I'm learning about sales and selling the ad space and the products and everything that we do as well. But to put all of that off the table just for a second, my girlfriend is a doctor. She comes back after work feeling drained from doing not a you've been driving around in the car and having conversations for 12 hours, A, running around like a headless chicken, like a lunatic, telling family members that people aren't very well, telling people that people are going to die. Physically, when she's on call, she is literally doing CPR on people. She's managing all these processes. And she comes in from a day of work and she's tired and she asks me what I've done. I'm like, well, I had a stressful phone call at 2:00. And that for me is the context for all of this. Clearly, she's reasonably well paid. I wouldn't do the role for the money that she's on. Take that for what it's worth. I would want to be on £500,000 a year minimum to be under the physical, the mental, the emotional stress that she's under. And so every time she comes home to me and tells me a tale, something went crazy wrong, or obviously you've got the flip side of things going crazy right, and she will have someone who has a cardiac arrest and they make it through, and it's down to her and the team around her that have achieved that. So you have the ups as well. But when salespeople complain about making a cold call being stressful and sapping their energy, when salespeople complain about this, that, and that, it's nothing, right? And then we're not even into the military and what people are doing off in Iraq and all these other places, which is even more so than what my girlfriend's doing. That's literally having like bullets flying past the side of your head. It's incredible.
Right.
So I just wanted to put that into the context of the person who's typing in the office, who's sat around miserable people all day. That's probably more draining than the person who is the salesperson who's out on the road or making calls, which is kind of, it goes up and up and up and up in scale. And there's probably astronauts. There's probably someone else who tops the military when we look at heart rate, when we look at the amount of adrenaline that's dumped into them throughout the day and all these kind of things. So I just thought that was worth pondering on for a split second. But something's brought up here, and we're going off the track, which is perfectly fine, of habits and routines. I'll bring it back in a second. Don't worry. Tim and the audience will get back to what we started off in a second. But how do we know whether our friends are a drag? How do we know whether our colleagues are a drag? And how do we know whether we should cut them off? Because I've done this consistently. I've got all friends who listen to the show now who are they're in sales. They are somewhat bitter that I just don't speak to them anymore. And they were just a suck of my energy. I didn't get anything. I'm happy to give that 51% in a relationship as long as at some point, at the very least, they are positive and encouraging, and even blindly encouraging at sometimes if they don't understand what's going on, whether it's business or personal stuff. I'd rather someone just put a positive spin on it than give me any dose of reality. I don't need that. How do we know, Tim, whether someone is a suck on our resources or whether they are a useful member to have around us?
I think if you're questioning it, they're wrong. Because I found there are a lot of people, because we reach a lot of people on our channel, and it's interesting just analyzing human behavior. This has been my area of fascination. And I found sometimes people are looking for that verification before they take action. And often when people come to me and they say, "Hey, Tim, should I quit my job?" I'm like, what do you want to happen? What do you want to have happen? And they're like, well, and they come up with the stories. And about, 20 minutes later, they're like, yeah, I want to quit. I'm like, quit, right? And they're like, okay, sure. And then later on, they'll be like, oh my God, Tim changed my life. But the reality is you know exactly what is that you got to do. You just didn't pull the trigger. And I think, whenever I get people coming to me like that, I just think sometimes I'm just very blunt. I'm like, just quit then. And they're like, but. So in regards to, let's say, the peer group, I would say if you're questioning your friends right now, but I also follow, when I shared the stage with Jarek Robbins, his dad's the big guy. He's also a speaker as well. And basically, Jarek was saying about the 33% rule in regards to getting peer group. And I found that to be really powerful. And what the 33% rule is you get people who are below you, and they're those you look to serve, contribute, and so forth to really fulfill that human need. You get the people, the 33% on the same level as you, that keeps you grounded, that you can bounce ideas from, and so forth. And you get the 33% above you, who are the mentors, the coaches that are helping you to grow constantly. And so that's what I utilize in my life. So if I, for example, feel like the people who are, I'm currently friends with, if I feel like they are below me, but they still love the advice, and I feel like I'm serving them, I do sometimes keep them within my peer group. However, if they are friends who I'm constantly hanging around with, and they are like this, they meant to be on the same level, but they're not quite on the same level, that's when I would say it's time to trade up, because you become who you hang around with, and that's not serving you nor your community at any level.
And it's okay to be selfish on this, right, Tim? It's okay to, no one's, maybe people are upset for a split second that you don't want to spend so much time with them. But I guess that's almost a kick in the ass for them as well. And hopefully that's a moment of realization that they can perhaps do more than what they're doing. And you care about them to the point that you're willing to ditch them to give them that motivation, if that makes sense. I'm just trying to play devil's advocate in my mind of people going, well, I've known this person since college or high school, and so I'm almost committed to them at this point. But I don't think that is the case.
Yeah, well, can't tell you how many times I've received that comment. I've got a video on YouTube that's got like 3 million views, and my fifth point was to get rid of your friends basically sucking all your energy out. And so basically, people were, oh my God, a lot of haters in regards to that. And so what I would say is this, I've said this many times, is if you really, really care about your friends, you'll be more than happy to leave them. Because most people, what they say to me in regards to this, why they don't want to leave their friends, is because, oh, it's been that childhood friend from middle school. We've gone through all of this journey together, and I want them part of, this journey, and also want them, help them to grow. And that's when I stop them. I'm like, oh, so you want them to also grow. You see, most people, they're also trying to change their friends because they realize, oh, I can change my life. But what you have to realize is what got you from A to B doesn't necessarily get you from C to D. Just because they were part of that journey, something made you different. Something made you realize, for example, I suddenly started paying attention to a program called Dragon's Den when my friends were just going out, just constantly clubbing all the time. And I'm like, why am I so weird? And when I believe you are just, it's something clicks. The moment that happens, what's funny is you also trying to transform your friends. And that's what happened in my life. I began to basically say, hey, you should watch Dragon's Den. Hey, you should read this book. And what I realized is maybe that's not the journey they're born to live. And if you really, really care about your friends, you'd be more than happy to leave them, because the reality is by you trying to pull them up, they're not going to get inspired by that. Most people who are average tend to get inspired by results. And that's why, for example, people in our industry like to show off cars and stuff, because when people suddenly, for example, you pull up in a nice car to your old friends, they'll be like, holy, how did you get that car? And that's how they're normally inspired, right? Because most people are inspired by material. And so I think if you really care, you'd be more than happy to leave them. That serves them on a higher level. And at the same time, for example, with Steve Jobs, he's been my biggest inspiration in my life. When people, for example, look at Steve Jobs and his success, they're like, oh my God. But when I say to people, he's my biggest idol, people say, oh, but did you hear about what he did? About firing people in the elevator, not treating his daughter, whatever, right or wrong. You got to always ask yourself, what is the intent behind that action? And if it's a positive intent, for example, Steve Jobs realized there has to be sacrifices if he wants to change the world. And I think that's why he had to do the stuff that he did. Yes, were those little actions horrible or negative? To a certain extent, depending on how you view them. But did he end up changing the world for the better? I would say he certainly did. And so it's all about the intent behind that action.
Makes total sense. So I'm going to drag things back on track here for a second, Tim. We're going to go back to habits. I can perhaps weigh in with some success habits that salespeople, I hate to use the word should, but it's almost to the point now where they should be doing certain things every single day. Not even in my humble opinion, in 400 recorded episodes of this show, the same things crop up every time. But other than the sales side of things, which I'll interject in a second, is there any success habits that you see in your interviews and all the work that you're doing that crazy successful people are doing every day? Is there anything that really stands out when I ask you that question? Is there anything that jumps out that we as Sales Nation, as sales professionals in the B2B space should be doing as well?
The reality is we all probably know them, but it's just the fact that we're not really doing them. I think what I found from people who are really high performers, and I would say, wow, I look up to those people. I've noticed their physique is also in check as well. It's the mind and body connection. So it's the whole lifestyle about the health. Are you really eating the right diet? And also, going to the gym every single morning. Those little things I found, amongst high achievers, they've mastered. Because if the health isn't in check, you cannot find a single hack. And if you do, it's temporary solution. Because again, it's about the mental capacity. So how can we improve our mental capacity and performance if our health the engine isn't running properly.
Makes total sense. And for me, this may work for other people, but I can only kind of talk about myself. So I, over the past 8 months or so, I'm getting somewhat serious in kind of lifting and powerlifting. Clearly, I'm a complete lanky bastard, so there'll be years of before it kind of shows physique-wise or anything like that. But it becomes a game for me, and it's fascinating of how. So I'm super competitive, and it's interesting to me how competitive I am of lifting these big lumps of iron. Doesn't mean anything. No one else cares. Doesn't make any sense. But that is a perfect start to each of my mornings of at least I've done what I wanted to achieve. The days when I kind of get those records, when I go that little bit further, they are days when I then excel at everything else. And it kind of, as you kind of alluded to there, Tim, it like spirals outwards. So maybe we see all these super successful people. If you look at people on stage, there's very few, and tell me if I'm wrong here, but this is kind of outside looking in. We might go down a weird road here, so I'll keep it short. But there's very few crazy fat public speakers who are totally out of shape, who are, I don't think there's perhaps not a level of an attractiveness of, professional speakers who are all super hot. But when you look at people on TV, certainly people who are on news anchors, who are weather reporters, not necessarily that they are hot, but they are well groomed, they are well dressed. I guess all this kind of adds to your success of how can you give someone a job if they come in and they're all tatty and they don't look like they look after themselves. Rightly or wrongly, I guess that reflects then on the potential performance or the perceived performance that you think you'll get from them. Of if they can't control the weight, then does that and there's probably research on this versus kind of us bounce around opinions, but there's probably there's an assumption there that you are not disciplined, right? Am I making this up? Does that make somewhat sense?
I think a lot of people would I suppose agree if they're fit, but also get very offended if they're not fit right now. But I do agree to a certain extent. I suppose that is the stereotype in a sense. But I have actually found it in my life how when I was lazy, honestly, you can tell from my body I was lazy. And however, on the rare occasion, I do come across some people who are overweight, but very sharp businessmen. But again, some people, you can find the research that basically proves you're right either way, sure. Right? So I would say, yeah, I'm with you on this one, yeah.
You're far more diplomatic about how you kind of PC how you put that across. So I appreciate that. Yeah, and just as I've offended 4% of the audience, we'll move on to the next thing here. For me, and we'll wrap up with this, Tim. For me, for sales professionals, the habits that you should have every morning are at least planning your day in the morning, if not planning it the night before. If you are cold calling, if you're cold emailing, to get these kind of things done first thing, even if you have a better response in the afternoon or the evening, I feel like it's better to do the tasks that build your sales pipeline first thing, because in my experience, you just end up firefighting by 2:00. You're just dealing with your sales manager asking you for ridiculous reports that no one needs. You're firefighting with customers that have complaints or questions or issues, and you obviously want to respond as quickly as possible to them. Is there anything else that you would add to that of things that salespeople specifically should be doing as a habit, as a routine, every single morning, other than the gym and the eating healthy?
I think it's all about, I believe this, and for me, it's transformed a lot of stuff. It's basically realizing the fact that I don't believe we're in business to customer, B2C, nor B2B. I believe we're in the business of, changing lives, H2H, human to human or heart to heart. And when I, for example, really connect to that every single morning in regards to why am I doing, why am I really doing what I'm doing? What sort of impact do I want to leave today? When I connect to that, and when I connect to the community, sometimes part of morning routine, I'm just going through, the letters we get sent in, the emails, the comments, and so forth. I connect to why I'm serving. Because, for example, most salespeople, they're just focused on the numbers. And, I've been there, right, as a business owner, focusing on numbers, the profit, the losses, and so forth. But sometimes, especially when you're online, the numbers get the better of you, and you just feel so disconnected. I had a client of mine who said to me, "Oh, Tim, I only got 100 views last week." And I looked at him in the eyes and said, "So are you saying 100 people's lives don't matter?" Because I believe if you can't serve those 100 people, you won't be able to get a million views. I was able to get millions because I care about every single person, not the views, that we're serving. And so I think a salesperson needs to realize what selling is serving. By you not closing the deal, by you not selling to them, you're not serving them at any level, because then they have to go off and try to find other alternative solutions, wasting more of their time sitting on pain. And so that's why I'm so adamant. Somebody was literally commenting this morning, Tim, please stop sending me these emails. I don't want to sign up to your program. They need to realize why I'm doing it, because I know the fact that they're in pain. They're trying to resolve this. And so the intent is I got to serve them. And the fact that they're saying this, well, at least I'm visible in their world and they know how much I care.
I guess you're giving them the opportunity, and if they're consuming all the content, if I'm assuming you're some kind of email list that they're on there, they've gone that step of giving an email address in. It's it's almost like a cry for help then at that point, that I know the pain point, I know potentially how to solve it, but I'm not taking the action from that. And that's probably a conversation for another time, Tim, of how we get people over that lump, because that happens in B2C, B2B, and everywhere else as well. And with that, mate, I've got one final question to ask everyone that comes on the show. So I know you're not out and out a sales professional, but clearly you're selling, you run a business, so you'll have an insight on this. If you could go back in time and speak to your younger self, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give him to help him become better at selling?
I think what would help is exactly what I was saying before. When I become more human in my business, and when I just tell people how it really is, because when we do stage speaking, it's so much different from webinars. You see, webinar, you're seeing all these numbers. For example, we just recently did a webinar, around 500 people joined us. Now, you take that to a context of live stage, even 100 people looking at you in the eyes is quite overwhelming for some. And when I go to the sales part of the presentation, you see a lot of people, especially on the stage, they begin to close up, and then they're happy during the content. But when you start to transition to close, the energy, you can really feel it when it's live, and they're looking at you different. And then, at the end of it, when I begin to really just stack the offer the value, and the offer, the discount or whatever I like to offer, I basically at the end, I just say how it really is. I tell them the fact that, I'm just here to help you. And the reason why, yes, I'm so energetic about selling to you is because I know the fact this will change your life. And when I really connect to that energy, I found that everything begins to shift. Because when I was younger, I was looking up at these ninja tricks, I like to call them, the hacks. And I learned a lot. I read a lot of good selling books. But I found what surpasses everything is when another human being can really see and feel the fact that you're literally trying to change their lives. And when you can go above and beyond, just like how Zappos says, delivering happiness, how, for example, the Ritz-Carlton, they're always oversubscribed. Whilst Premier Inn, they're struggling to get clients, but the Ritz charge 10 times. Why? Because it's all about delivering that H2H value. When I focus on that, the human element, that changes. So that's what I would say. Just become more human and just serve, because that's what you're born to do.
And do you agree with this, Tim? This is something that we talk about all the time on the show, that sales professionals, that human-to-human connection, that ability to physically build rapport and either be on the phone, online, being in the same room as someone, that is the biggest competitive advantage. Is that something that you would agree with as well?
What, in regards to?
Into beating the competitor, or so let me rephrase that. So we talk about on the show that marketers are trying to take sales jobs. AI is trying to take sales jobs. The internet and an online order form has, and we've talked about this a million times, if your sales role can be replaced by an online order form, you need to get out of the job immediately, because it will happen if it hasn't happened already. So all of those, though, it's very difficult to market, and you can be yourself, you can market to a certain persona, you can use email hacks and customization to get people's names right, you can segment a list, you can go into detail, and sales professionals use some of these tools as well if they're trying to do certain outreaches and certain cold email campaigns. But, and again, if you don't agree, tell me, because it'd be interesting as well, but I feel like the individual salesperson, the B2B salesperson, typically, doing deals from 10K to kind of a couple of 100,000, which is the world I was from in medical devices. The biggest competitive advantage I had wasn't that my product was better than someone else's. It was the fact that I could sit next to a surgeon, build rapport with them, really get under the skin, find out what their problems were, have them know, like, and trust me, not through any particular skill, but from just wanting to, just giving a shit about them and caring about them, and wanting because in the NHS here in the UK, it's super easy to understand that they've got so much money, they can only spend it in certain places, they only want to deal with certain people, they only want to have certain results, and the results are a patient being well or not as well. So it's super clearly defined of whether you're doing morally a good job or not. But I always thought that my biggest competitive advantage would be able to sit down with people and have them understand things, take that time with them, be present with them. And that's what sold more medical devices for me than the fact that this endoscope did, I don't know, some bullshit thing that marketing had stuck on a label on the side of it. Is that something you agree with, that for B2B salespeople who are doing these bigger deal sizes, the competitive advantage is them? It's nothing else. It's something that they're in control of.
Yeah, no, I would definitely say it's true. Nowadays we're living in a stage where, for example, you meet a friend who's just connected with somebody else, and they'll be like, "Oh my God, you should meet this guy. So authentic, so genuine." Genuine and being authentic is such a rare trait nowadays, because everybody's walking around like a freaking chameleon and never connecting because they're wearing so many masks. And this, I think, it's been a big stereotype in the selling world. And my audience, anyone's audience, they're naturally close to selling as a result. And I think, yeah, that H2H element of meeting somebody face to face, or even via Skype or so forth, it's more real. And even online world is transitioning towards that. And this is why, for example, we've got live chat, and that's why live chat's so popular nowadays on order forms, because people don't just want to check out. They want to speak to somebody with all these objections, and there's real human on there. This is why, for example, Business Insider has released stats showing the fact that, the social messenger platforms have now overtaken social media. So this is why Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp is exploding. People want that instant message with another human being. And yeah, you can automate that process, but that's defeating the whole purpose. People want it real nowadays, I believe. So yeah, I would agree.
Love it. Tim, with that, mate, tell us a little bit about the YouTube channel. Tell us where we can find out more about you. And you got many things going on. So share with the audience where we can find all that good stuff as well.
Definitely. So I think the best entry, the gateway drug, would be probably going to my YouTube channel, Success Insider. It's where I teach stuff that I've learned from my life transformation journey, which is almost a decade now. And also I feature some guests every now and then. And it teaches about habits, performance, and how you can really master your life. Because there are some people who are walking around on this planet who are totally confused. They don't know what to do. And if you are somebody like that right now, well, there's some content that will help you with that journey. At the same time, you may be very clear in regards to what you want to achieve, but the fact that you can get better. Well, there are videos that's basically specifically tailored for that. How can you really maintain the performance throughout the day so you can really run the day and not let the day run you? So that's my YouTube channel, Success Insider. If the content resonates, by all means, feel free to subscribe.
Well, we will link to that in the show notes of this episode. We'll link to the website and everything else as well over at salesmanpodcast.com. And with that, Tim, I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for bearing with me, because we went on track, off track, and all over the place. And so that's a testament to you, sir, and your knowledge that we could have this conversation and go kind of go in uncharted territory. So I appreciate that. And I want to thank you for joining us on the Salesman Podcast.
Definitely. Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it. Thank you.